Let's go ahead and do a highlight video here, Brian, on this Tuesday edition of ATS Radio. Of course, I'm joined by Brian Blessing of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. I'm host Adam Burke here. We're taking a look at some of the games that are on our radars here for week 6. A lot of interesting stuff to take a look at. Of course, we were supposed to get Miami and Denver. Now we're not, because we've got Denver and New England and all sorts of different stuff going on as a result of the coronavirus. But one game in particular that I wanted to start with here, Brian, Atlanta and Minnesota, game 255, 256. The current line on this one, Minnesota, 3.5-point favorite. Total coming down, interestingly enough, 255. We saw it last week, and we talked about it last week. Bill O'Brien getting canned from the Houston Texans. Would they get that bump? Was it a one-game bump? Is it more than that? And the Texans won and covered pretty comfortably against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What do you think about Atlanta here this week, where they, now no longer have Dan Quinn on that sideline?
It's more Minnesota I'm thinking about, because I know we talked about this last week, Adam, and we talked about it in the summer and said there are going to be some teams that start very slow, and the adjustments, power rankings, it's going to bleed out for a month, not a week or two. And Minnesota to me was that team. Them beating Houston, I said they're finally figuring this thing out, and everybody pokes holes at Cousins, but the emergence of Jefferson on the other side of Thielen gave them some weapons. And as Minnesota, I think, is a pretty good football team. And then they go and give the game away against Seattle. So I that was just a grisly loss, and wonder if they're deflated. But with the combination of Cook and Madison, and we'll see if Cook is healthy, I think he'll be okay. This guy always seems to tweak something, but he's tough and he always keeps playing. If Minnesota somehow puts that behind them, I think Minnesota's a good football team. Matt Ryan, last week, they finally get a good running game and a good outing from Gurley, and then Ryan goes and throws this horrible interception. Atlanta's a dog's breakfast. I don't know how you trust them. If I had to play the game, see, the hook is problematic for me. I'd lay the 3 with Minnesota, but I think I like it to be high scoring.
It's such an interesting thing for Atlanta. Look, they're very banged up in the secondary. Guys like Allen and Neal and KZ have missed time. But also they no longer have this cloud hanging over them of when is Dan Quinn going to get fired? Because Dan Quinn, for all intents and purposes, should have been fired last year. The team rallied, saved his job. We talked about that last week on the show. I talked about it when I took Carolina for the Circa on Friday's show. How many times are they going to go to bat for this guy before they say, you know what, maybe we can't win with him. Maybe we need a change of voice, something like that. Now they get it. So now they're kind of playing a little bit freer and easier without Dan Quinn. The problem is,
man, I'm going nuts. Okay, that writing was on the wall last year. Look at the Jags. They're doing the same thing with Marone. The O'Brien thing, he would drive you nuts. But, they made the playoffs last year, won a game, and you can disagree with the trade. Could they have just fired him as GM? You could disagree with the trades he made. But they played Baltimore, Kansas City, and who was Pittsburgh. What's he supposed to do? He didn't make the schedule. I don't know. They're guys that flat out this ain't going to work. The O'Brien thing eventually probably would have ended, but I don't understand these teams that are willing to do this a month in. They either you knew or you didn't know.
Especially the case of Atlanta. I think you knew. I understand that Dan Quinn was there when they went to the Super Bowl, but that was just kind of the beginning of the end, because they've blown so many fourth quarter leads and stuff like that. There are just some guys that are simply coordinators, and Dan Quinn is a defensive coordinator. And I don't think he's a head coach, and he'll find a job as a defensive coordinator and probably be a good one. But the thing about Bill O'Brien was that Bill O'Brien could at least game plan. And I think he did a pretty good job of that. Dan Quinn, I don't really know so much. The thing about this game is I think Atlanta's maybe just not very good. I thought Atlanta would be a pretty decent team coming into the season, albeit in a very tough division. I think Atlanta is just not very good. And, Julio Jones has been banged up. It's been a question week in and week out if he's going to play. The defense isn't great, especially with all of their injuries. I just don't think Atlanta is that good of a team. I don't think Houston's a great team, but they were playing Jacksonville. Atlanta's playing Minnesota, a much better team, and a Minnesota team that's going to find its way with Mike Zimmer after all the personnel he had to replace on the defensive side. I don't think you get the one-game coaching bump here. I think Minnesota is just that much better than Atlanta. And also, too, let's say Minnesota finishes that game and beats Seattle. Let's say Dan Quinn's not fired. This line's 6, at least in my opinion. I think this line is Minnesota -6. So I think you've got two circumstantial things here that have dragged this line down. I think 3.5 is a little bit cheap based on the body of work for these two teams.
I agree with everything you said. The one thing is not a X's and O's thing. It's an intangible thing. And that's, is Minnesota deflated from coughing up the game or mad? You know, if Minnesota's mad, they win by 14 or more. If they're deflated, they could spit the bit and blow another one. But good luck figuring that one out in a box score.
I think that's fair too, because if you win that game, all of a sudden you've got a shot at the wild card, and now you don't. You know, because I mean, you're probably not going to make it. You know, starting out 1-4. So there is that. You know, now you sort of wonder what their prospects are for the rest of the season. But I just think they're a better team. I just think that they're a much better team. The line implies that. And Atlanta now, I mean, you know, I don't know how much this wasn't a situation like Houston with Bill O'Brien, where apparently he had that falling out with JJ Watt and all of that. A lot of the Falcons players were like, look, you know, Dan Quinn's a good guy. Dan Quinn is a guy that I enjoyed playing for, that I want to play for. You didn't hear that about Bill O'Brien. You didn't hear people go, yeah, Bill O'Brien was a great guy. We're going to miss him. I think for Atlanta, I think it's more of disappointment that, you know, look, we couldn't help this guy out more. You know, we couldn't make plays at the end of games, and we kind of got our coach fired. Whereas I think for Houston, it's sort of, hey, Bill O'Brien's gone, this is awesome kind of thing. So I think they're just two very different situations, I think. But people will draw that natural comparison, and that's why, you know, I kind of wanted to talk about it on today's show.
Well, come on, let's get to it. I mean, you're drooling. I can see it. You got your teenage
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I'll make sure I get it right. Your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle drool cup on. Let's go. Let's talk about the Browns. Are they ready to throw a parade or what?
I mean, 4-1 feels parade worthy for this organization. Look, Cleveland and Pittsburgh game 261-262. Steelers 3.5-point favorite, total 51. These two teams have played 43 times since the Browns came back in 1999. Pittsburgh has won 35 of them. There is a tie in there too. But Pittsburgh has dominated this series straight up. Against the spread, it's pretty close to 50-50. So there is that. But this is a very one-sided rivalry. Now you got probably the best Browns team in a very long time. Offensively, they're one of the most efficient teams in the NFL. They're going to face a Pittsburgh pass rush that's really unlike anything they've seen to this point. But fascinating game. X's and O's, matchups, everything. I'll definitely be doing a deep dive on this one throughout the week. But Brian, what are your thoughts at Pittsburgh -3.5 and 51 on the total?
This. First of all, the schedule that the AFC North is playing is unbelievable. It is cupcake city. It's ridiculous. All right. I think Pittsburgh wins this game. I think they cover the spread. Don't hate me, Browns fans, because you're going to go on a Tootsie Roll. Okay, you beat Indy, but, you know, Rivers, 1 week to the next, you just don't know what the hell you're going to get. But after this game, the Browns have the Bengals, the Raiders, but you get them at home. They get the Texans, the Eagles, the Jags, and then, okay, you got to play the Ravens again. But you close with the Giants, the Jets, and then the rematch with the Steelers. If this team stays healthy, I mean, you're looking at 10, 11 wins. I think this is the deep end of the – if they win this game, I mean, look out. I think you nailed it, the pass rush and a Pittsburgh defense that can create turnovers. Based on who Cleveland's played already, again, that's a good win against Indy, don't get me wrong. But again, Rivers – makes a goofball throw here and there. The Browns got pitchforked by the Ravens, which all teams do in the opening week. But then you beat the Bengals and the Redskins, so that's not parade worthy. They beat the Cowboys, which was impressive, but the Cowboys, they couldn't stop Kent State offensively. And then you beat Indy with Rivers helping the cause. I think this is a tough one for the Browns, but I think it's a good football team. They're going to win a lot of games.
Here's what I'll say. First of all, I agree with the line move. I think 4 was high. I think 3.5 is getting closer. I think this is legitimately 3, with the fact that we don't have the same level of home field advantage. I agree that Pittsburgh is a higher power rated team than Cleveland, and they should be. I think it's probably maybe a 2.5 point difference between the two. So if you give a point or so for home field, whatever, 3.5, I think that's a pretty fair number. I do think 4 was a little bit high. I agree with anybody that bet 4. I think that's a good number to grab. There are a couple of things that I kind of wonder about this game. The first is Baker doesn't take great care of the football. He will make some throws that are a little bit aggressive. He will make some decisions that are a little bit questionable. Now, Kevin Stefanski is moving the pocket a lot more, and the Browns' running game is very good. Is that enough to kind of stunt that Pittsburgh pass rush? It could be. But also, Pittsburgh is pretty good in the back 7. So that's the matchup for me, is Baker Mayfield against that Pittsburgh back 7. Does he have those crippling turnovers that we've seen from him? He does not take great care of the football. So that's the thing for me. Does he sacrifice possessions here in this game? Because if he does, this Browns defense is average at best. Maybe they get healthier this week. Maybe they don't. But that's the thing for me, is the Browns have to take care of the football. If the Browns win the turnover battle, I think they win this football game. If they don't, Pittsburgh wins and probably covers. To me, I think that's too risky of a play to make. I probably won't have a bet on this game, but that's the thing for me. Baker has to take care of the football. He has to make smart decisions, get rid of it when the pass rush shows up, and not throw into double coverage, not make any overly aggressive decisions, because this has been a very efficient offense. They can run the ball. They've got a ton of great weapons. So that's the thing for me. Does Baker turn it over? If he doesn't, Cleveland wins and they make that push for the playoffs. If he does, then they hope to take advantage of the weak schedule.
I have no conviction on this game. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And is this an oxymoron? I'm going to say this, that you've got an unbeaten Steelers team and a Browns team that's feeling their oats with one loss. Heading into this game, I don't know if I trust either team to say how good are they, all right? Because what we're saying with the Browns, again, you got emulsified by the Ravens, and okay, you've done great work since. Well, the Steelers beat the Giants. They beat the Broncos with the quarterback out. They beat the Texans, who fired their coach. And then they beat the Eagles, who is coming out of the NFC least. So it's not either of these teams' fault. You play who's in front of you. But in terms of who they've actually played, both of them, I don't know that I trust how good either of them really are. If the gun to my head, I think the Browns have been flashy and fun. But at the end of the day, who do I think is the better team? As long as Roethlisberger's upright with the balance they have, I'd give the nod to Pittsburgh. But to this point, I don't know how good either of them are, because for the most part, they haven't played anybody.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one thing I guess I will say, as far as the side goes, I don't like anything. But as I was just thinking about it with the total, you don't see AFC North totals of 51. And in fact, going back to 1989, the 1989 season, this is the highest total in a Browns versus Steelers game. So we're talking about a very large sample size. They play each other at least twice a year. They had a playoff matchup in there as well. 51's a high total here. And maybe this is just reflective in general of scoring being up across the NFL. But when we're talking about a historic outlier of a total, I have to look at the under, and I don't know if I will bet the under here in this game. But again, it is a divisional game between two teams that are pretty familiar with each other, at least from a personnel standpoint. Historically high total. I think under 51 may be the way to go in this game.
I got to tell you, bud, I think the numbers And you're right on the total for pause for concern. But again, the Browns gave up 38 to the Ravens, and I draw a line through that first game. But they gave up 30 to the Bengals, 49-38 to the Cowboys. Yeah, there's a lot of points being scored out there, man.
Oh, I agree.
And honestly, and I'm not knocking what you're saying, but to make the blanket statement, and we know what this division's been all about, but let's give the Browns credit. This offense, they can run the ball effectively. If Chubb was in there, I mean, the total would be even higher. But this is a Browns team that seems to enjoy playing the track meetish kind of games.
They do. And part of that is because they've had a lot of injured personnel in the back seven. Greedy Williams has been out. Mac Williams has been out. Denzel Ward's been out. We'll see what the injury report looks like for them. If they get those guys back, then I probably will look at the under 51. But just putting it out there as a historical outlier, I think is something that's really interesting, to say the least. Brian, one other game I want to touch on with you here for this highlight video on our ATS YouTube page. Green Bay and Tampa Bay. Green Bay, 2.5. Although this one's kind of all over the place, 2.5. Total has gone up on this game. This one's now up in the 54.5 range down on the Gulf Coast of Florida. What do you think about this one here, where you got a battle of the bays with Green Bay with some extra prep time and Tampa Bay with some extra prep time as well, but off of a really disappointing and kind of flat effort against the Bears?
Yeah, Tampa Bay to me is really interesting. Brady knows what he's doing out there when he can count the downs. But to get the running game consistently going for Tampa Bay, if they can continue to run the football, they're pretty dangerous. And he's got the weapons with Godwin and Evans that he just hasn't had in a long time to be able to stretch the field. But I think it's one of these things where they can run a little bit hot and cold. In Green Bay, everybody was shooting holes at their draft, and they did nothing to help Rodgers. But what's helping Rodgers, they can run the ball. And all these years, Rodgers back there dancing around and doing everything by himself. But the fact that they can run the ball right now with consistency and so effective makes Green Bay really, really, a dangerous football team. I don't know that the coaches get in the way of this one, but just the matchup, Brady and Rodgers, both of these guys seem to rally around and rise to that moment and go, okay, let's go. There's like a legacy thing, when they're all done playing. But remember that day we played? And I don't know. I can see both these quarterbacks having a big day.
I think something that's really interesting about Green Bay here is that I don't think we're respecting what they're doing in 2020 because we all looked at their 2019 and said they're not as good as their record. We looked at their point differential and said, this is a regression team. And then they got to the playoffs and they didn't look particularly good. I think maybe this is just a very good football team. And I think now, with Matt LaFleur having another year with this team, with Aaron Rodgers looking the way that he does this season, I think Green Bay might just be really good. And I think that we might have to ignore some of those regression signs from the previous year. And I think when you look at how this team is being evaluated in the betting market, I think some of that sentiment from last year, the expectation of negative regression, the expectation of sharp money coming in against them, I think it's led to them being a little bit underpriced. I don't know if I'll take them at 2.5 here. I want to look into this game a little bit more. Like I said, I was out of town over the weekend, so I didn't check out a whole lot in the NFL. But I think that maybe there is this chance that we're valuing 2019 too much and 2020 not enough for Green Bay. And I think maybe they're just one of the NFL's elite teams this year.
I think maybe a good way to play this, Adam, would be over in the first half. Because you get Tampa played a Thursday night game, and the Packers are coming off the bye. So both teams have extra time to get ready for the game and really install packages that will be effective. And then when you're in the game, maybe they make adjustments at halftime to slow the other two teams down. But maybe I'd give the nod to the offenses here out of the gate because of both teams having extra time to prepare. And you look at the Green Bay game. I mean, they beat Atlanta, who's basically kind of packed it in here, and that was a low-scoring game, the first under that the Packers had played. I think these teams get after it and go up and down the field in the first half. I think go inside the game for me. That kind of makes sense. I think I'd look at over in the first half.
I like that too, especially because we've talked about this a lot here on the show. The one thing that did benefit the Packers last year was that they were a very fast starter. The scripted plays from Matt LaFleur were excellent. And now you've got, as you mentioned, a lot of time to work on that game script. First quarter over, I think, is a good look. First half over is a good look. Again, this total has gone up from 51.5 or so up to 54.5. So it is on the rise. But, one of the things that you can do to some degree to sort of get a little bit of that equity back is play a derivative like a first half total. So you're not taking over 55 for the full game. You're kind of looking at that first half. So some good thoughts here. Go ahead.
Yeah, but can you at least on Tuesdays, can you tailor your comments to who your guest is with the equity and derivatives and all these big words? I mean, I'm not that smart.
You're an old dog, but you can still learn new tricks, man.
Well, I know I can use those big words because I know they sound good in a sentence. I just don't know what it means.
Well, I'll have you watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before next week's show. So.
All right, there you go.
There's Brian Blessing. I'm host Adam Burke here with a highlight video on our ATS YouTube page, taking a look at Week 6 around the NFL. Make sure you listen to our full editions of ATS Radio, which you can find on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you stream and download your podcast content.